This is A Voice, a podcast with Dr. Gillyanne Kayes and Jeremy Fisher.
This is A Voice.
Hello and welcome to This is A Voice, Season 11, Episode 12.
The podcast where we get vocal about voice.
I'm Jeremy Fisher.
And I'm Dr. Gillyanne Kayes.
And the first thing I'm going to do is apologise for my voice because I don't normally speak at this octave. This is because I have a cold. Hello and welcome. Now, Gillyanne, you're introducing today.
Yes, I would like to say welcome to Dr. Melissa Forbes, who is Associate Professor of Contemporary Singing in the Music Department at the University of South Queensland. Her byline is Make Music That Matters, which I think is wonderful.
Love it.
She is the author of the new podcast, Leading Notes, and she's also the author of a book that is coming up very soon called Making Music That Matters. Melissa, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. It's like meeting old friends.
Okay, where are we starting?
I'd just like to tell the listeners that one of the reasons why we particularly asked Melissa was that Melissa kindly asked me to perhaps say a few words about her forthcoming book, Making Music That Matters, which meant, of course, I had to read the entire book. What a pleasurable task. And there were so many things in this book that absolutely resonated with what we're finding now in the singing community, particularly as I think we are perhaps leaders in the field in training teachers and also choir leaders. I felt it was really important for us to have Melissa and talk about the content of the book and how she got to be where she is right now. So how did you...
Where did you start?
Yeah, where did you start? What's your core interest now? And what flight corrections went en route?
Do you want the full story or the edited version?
We'll do the quick full story.
Quick full story. Look, I started out when I was a young adult working in commercial law. So I studied arts law at university.
Wow.
I loved my English literature, so I did that as a treat on the side while I studied law, which I found insufferably boring. But at the end of my degrees, I thought I had no other choice. This was like the mid-90s. So we were nowhere near as enlightened as we are now around, rear vision and strategy and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, it was all a bit thoughtless on my part. But it soon became apparent when I started working that it wasn't going to be a long-term thing for me. It did end up being 7.5 years. But there was a turning point where one night we had at our law firm, we had this black tie dinner, ostensibly to thank everybody for their hard work. And the managing partner gets up and says, look, it's been a very good year, everybody. Thanks for your contributions, but never forget this. If I have a bucket of water and I put your hand in that bucket and take it out, it's basically like it was never in there in the first place. And it was this really weird way of saying that all of us were replaceable.
Wow.
And we were all kind of shocked because on one hand, he's kind of right, but on the other hand, who wants to work in a place like that where that's how you're seen as just literally a cog in a machine?
Yeah.
And that was one of the moments where I thought, I can't do this for 50 years. I can't do this. I was a part of the staff band that would always perform at the Christmas parties, and that was my kind of outlet. And everybody would always say, oh, you are so good at this. And I'm like, yeah, I really should do something about this singing/music thing. And so I spoke to my managing partner at the time and said, look, I think I'm going to go back and study music at the Conservatorium of Music in Brisbane. And they said, great, do it. We'll give you a part-time job. We'll support you in whatever you want to do. So it was actually a pretty enlightened place to work for a law firm. But anyway, that was one of the flight corrections, definitely, was kind of taking that plunge and setting aside what had been almost 10 years of study and work to go and do something which was thought of as quite precarious and still is, probably even more so than it was then. But yeah, so that was kind of the first big turning point for me in terms of my journey towards finding a place for myself in music. And I think that's what my whole life has really been about, is music so much, and I want to know where my place is in it. Yeah.
Melissa, can I ask you a question? Because I'm always so fascinated by the history that people bring with them into the music industry, and you have such a clear, different history. Have you found that any of your lawyer brain has come in to the way that you work with music?
I think that it has set me up with some really great transferable skills, actually,
Yeah.
Particularly now that I'm working in the research space and in higher education. In terms of higher education, reading policies, I've had to write policies and procedures, all that kind of stuff I find very, not easy, but I understand how that stuff works.
I'm guessing, as you're now supervising people doing their PhDs, amongst other things, that analytical side of your brain, the ability to filter, to categorise, to organise, and also to assess what other people say about the research, it must be that sort of solicitor part of your brain is being transferred across there really usefully. What do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I think in terms of assessing against criteria or understanding, being able to break things down into their component parts, definitely has been something that's been transferred for me. I think just having to have worked so hard at law to really understand the nuts and bolts of something, like actually it taught me a lot about practice, to be honest, to really just persevere with something and to learn something at a very deep level. That was my first experience of practice, and I've really brought that love of practice into everything that I've done. I think practice is just such an interesting phenomenon, and something that is it's just a very life-giving thing, you know, and once you find that thing that is your practice, it's an amazing gift, I think. And I've had different practices over the years. So yeah, law was one. It didn't really work out, but it taught me lots of really useful things. Singing has been another where I've devoted a lot of time and energy and effort into learning the art and technique of singing, and dedicated hours upon hours to that. And now I find myself doing a very similar thing when it comes to research. And so it's almost like practice is one of the through lines in everything that I've done. I just think finding something that really challenges you, that you really want to learn, is a huge part of what's meaningful to be here on the planet.
Love that.
You know?
Love that. And I so want to talk to you about practice, because it's one of the things I'm really interested in.
So we're not actually talking about practicing here. We're talking about practice, the thing
Either.
that we do and the thing that we engage in. And of course, practicing that skill is within that framework. Have I understood that right?
Yeah, I think having a practice is really important. You know, anyone who's an artist understands what that means. It's like, even if you're a visual artist or if you're in the theatre, you have a practice, don't you? And you have certain things that you have to work on all the time. You're always learning. You're always finding new ways to express yourself within that particular medium. And I just find that so fascinating. And I feel like for me now, research is the thing where I get really excited about building my skills and learning new ways of doing things and finding creative ways through. And to me, they're all kind of the hallmarks of practice, you know. And Gillian will probably get onto this, but in terms of my book, I used positive psychology as a lens. And I've learnt through positive psychology that one of my signature strengths is love of learning. And that's the thing that kind of ties all those random experiences together, is that at every stage I've been driven by just that curiosity to learn more and more. And it's like an insatiable thing that I can never, it's a thirst I can never quench.
I love that. That's really clear as well. And I love that you look for patterns within things. So the pattern for you is the business of learning how, and the learning what, and the learning why, and where and when. And there's something very interesting about the whole learning thing, is that you've taken research, which is, and you can shoot me down on this one, it is essentially a dry subject. It's essentially you have to have your facts, you have to have your methodology, you have your processes, but you found a way to make it creative in the application, in the doing of it, in the collecting of it. even if you then can't, quotes, be creative within the reporting of it.
But you can.
Oh, go on, shoot me
But
down.
you can. I actually honestly think that this is the most creative I've ever been, is in research, because it's about generating new knowledge. It's about connecting things that haven't been connected before, and that's the definition of creativity, you know? And in terms of the way that you present it, there are so many really interesting arts-based methods now where you can present your findings as poetry, as photos, as works of art, as musical recordings. So I haven't actually done that myself yet, but I am really keen to explore poetic inquiry, which is where you present your findings as poems. That's going to be something I'm going to work on in the future. But yeah, I think that's an obvious way in which research findings are presented in a very creative and artistic way. I'm also really interested just in storytelling. That's another thing that I find fascinating. And so with my research, I try to make sure that it's accessible. People can read it and understand it. They don't have to go and look up 1,000 different words to try to understand what I'm saying. And it actually has a story to it. So again, like, that's another part of the practice of research that I absolutely love, is like, how can I make sure that when I write a journal article, it actually tells a story that someone wants to read and it's going to resonate with them. And so that's, again, I think it's a bit of a creative thing to be able to do that in a way that resonates with the reader.
Love that.
And that enables me to segue to the book. Now, there's going to be a bit of fluttering of papers here because of my extensive notes. One of the things I especially liked, let me see if I can find it here, that you used terms that are relevant to singing leadership and music. So, for example, you had call and response as part of your chapter structure. You had resonance. You had practice points. I think you had a coda at the end. Let me see what it was that you did right at the end.
Had a finale at the end.
A finale at the end.
Yeah.
So that it was all enmeshed in this idea of music making. And yet what you'd done was you really interweaved, because you were telling stories, actually, and relating stories of people that you interviewed. But you interweaved that with really solid research and the framework you just referred to, which is the psychology framework. Just tell me what it was again.
Positive psychology. Yeah.
Positive psychology. So that it's actually a jolly good read.
Thank you.
And I think that's super important. I do so much agree with you that research should be seen as creative. We had a training for our registered teachers last night with Kitty Verdolini Abbott, and she was talking about procedural learning and that sense of, if we can do the embodied learning and have the experiential, it informs the declarative, which is where we tend to see the academic writing and the academic research. But actually, we need to have that embodiment in order to really learn at a deep level.
Absolutely.
Anything that researchers can do to move us more towards that, I think, is a fabulous thing.
Oh, for sure.
We've jumped a bit, so I want to go back to.
We have, haven't we?
That's all right. We do
that.
We get here.
Yeah. I want to go back to being at the con and going and starting that journey, that part of your journey. So go back there.
I had no idea what I was doing.
That must have been scary because you've been in a very structured career.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it was really, when I think about it now, what a nerve I had to even turn up and audition, in a way, because I auditioned for the jazz program. Actually, I lie. I auditioned for the classical and the jazz program. I auditioned for the classical first because that's what I thought they offered. And I had been having some classical lessons. And then they were very kind, but they were like, do you know that we actually offer jazz? And I was like, oh, do you? Okay, maybe you should go to that one, go to that audition. And so I went to the jazz audition a few months after the classical one, and Again, I didn't even know what jazz was. Like, there was no internet. I think we forget what it was like back then. Like it's the dark ages, but it was really quite hard to find information in a way. Like, you had to really go to some effort to find out things. And I hadn't been exposed to jazz, so I didn't know what it was. Luckily, I had a friend who said, "Oh, why don't you sing like a Thelonious Monk around midnight?" I'm like, "Oh, who's that? Yeah, that sounds cool." Anyway, so I did that, and rocked up, and I must have done a fairly convincing job of it, because I passed both auditions, surprisingly. But anyway, that's all to say, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know anything about jazz, and I threw myself into it with absolute gusto, like I do with everything else, and then became obsessed with that for a good while. And jazz is the kind of thing you could just stick with it for your whole life, and you'd never learn all there is to learn. It's just the gift that keeps on giving in that respect. And so then when I finished at the con, I did embark on a performance career, and I recorded an album and all the usual things, because that was what we were very subtly told was what the good people did. If you wanted to be the best, then you had to pursue a performance career. There wasn't any discussion back in those days of portfolio careers or all the different things that musicians are doing these days.
Yeah.
It was very all or nothing. And I found after a while that performing was really de-energizing. I found it wasn't feeding my soul in the way that I thought it was supposed to. And, as we all know, there is so much more to getting up on stage than just getting up on stage. Lugging heavy equipment, trying to deal with difficult band members, writing charts, arranging music, promoting yourself, being responsible for how many tickets have been sold, all of that stuff. It just completely overwhelms
It's massive.
the thing that you really want to do, which is just get up and sing. And so I gradually flamed out of that. I gradually lost interest, and then found myself happenstance in a casual academic role, and again had no idea what that entailed, didn't know what it meant to work at a university. Probably took me at least 8 to 10 years to really figure out that, I was supposed to be doing research. It was just, there's so many things in my life where I'm like, I don't know how I could not have known that, but I didn't. And just figuring out each step of the way what it is that I'm supposed to be doing to make it work has been another theme that's run through everything that I've done.
I want to pick this up
We
straight away.
recognise this. Both of us recognise that.
Yes, absolutely. And because I'm also really interested in turning points for people. And it sounds like the first one when you went from working in law to go to music college was quite a distinct, definite, that's a turning point, that's the day I can point to.
Yeah.
This one, which is performing doesn't satisfy me, it's not working in the way that I thought it ought to, sounds like a more gradual one.
Yeah, for sure. And again, hats off to positive psychology, because it's helped me unpack what that was all about. It wasn't like I sucked. I was pretty good, and I would have gotten a lot better if I'd stuck with it. I probably would be quite masterful right now if I'd stuck with it all this time. But I had skill for sure, but it had become what in positive psychology terms is called a learned behaviour. So we have our signature strengths, and if we're operating from our strengths, we feel energised, we feel alive. We're like, this is what I'm meant to be doing. This is amazing. But for me, performing started out as that, but it gradually over time turned into something like, oh, God, do I really have to do this gig? Oh, do I really have to work with that person? Oh. And so it became quite de-energising and deflating and almost demoralising. It wasn't that I was bad at it, but I wasn't getting that kind of energetic return anymore. I think that's a really important distinction to make for people. Even if you're good at something, if it doesn't actually make you feel that feeling of like, wow, this is really, I'm in my zone here, then you need to have a think about whether it's something you want to keep doing. And again, that's another theme for me. I've been good at a lot of these things. I did very well at university, but did it make me feel like I was in my element? No way. and having the
very
language to
interesting.
talk about that at the time would have been very helpful.
Yes. I'm going
Yeah.
to say this although I recognise all the things that you're talking about, this language and methodology and labelling is something that's completely new to me, and I love having labels for things. Even if I discard them next week, it doesn't matter.
It's a nice lens, isn't it?
It really is, and it also legitimises the experiences that you go through, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it does. And even if it's something retrospective where you go back and you think, oh, okay, now it makes sense, it's still really helpful
Yes.
to understand perhaps why things turned out the way they did. Because another interpretation I could have taken of my performance career was that I wasn't that good, perhaps.
Yep.
But I actually don't think that was the case. I think it was more that all of the other circumstances surrounding being a musician at that time were such that it really sucked the life out of me.
I think it's so important to pay attention to that you might be really good at something, but if it causes you that much grief, then you really need to rethink what you're doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
And we can really fall into that sunk cost fallacy where we think, I've spent so much time on it, but you've only got one life as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and you have to watch out. I think you need a strong sort of standpoint to look at the change, because colleagues will say, oh no, you mustn't give up.
Uh-huh.
Oh, you
We've
mustn't.
had it.
You
We've
mustn't
had it in our
stop.
lives.
Yeah, we
Yes.
both had it.
Yeah.
Really interesting. I'm going to go back and read that part of the book.
I actually don't talk about learned behaviours in the book, but look it up. It's a UK researcher, Alex Lindley. He's done a lot of work on strengths within positive psychology, but he has broken it down so that he talks about strengths, learned behaviours, unrealised strengths, and weaknesses. So if we have a weakness, we try to minimise how much time we spend on that as much as possible. Don't waste time trying to get better at it. It's just a weakness.
Present with that.
Yeah. Understanding unrealised strengths is really important too, because then you can actually seek out opportunities to actually use those strengths more. So yeah, it's a very interesting and useful framework.
Thank you for that. So I would like to segue to, obviously I met you at conference several years ago with Irene Bartlett.
Yes.
But what really brought you onto my radar was a short article that you'd written. It was the year that I was doing the AOTUS keynote, so it was last year that you'd written and published on LinkedIn. And it was about the relationship between the World Health Organization declaring that there was a crisis of social health and deep loneliness experienced by so many people and a sense of not belonging.
Yes.
And it wasn't just due to the pandemic. It had been coming up for a while, but of course
Yes.
the pandemic really crystallized it. And you were saying, now when we start to look at music leadership, and in particular singing leadership, for want of a better word, community singing work, this is one of the ways that we can resolve this issue. And we have noticed, because we have choir leaders and singing leaders come on our training course, we've noticed that singing leadership has been under the radar for a long time.
Yes.
It's not new. It's been going on for decades. But now what's happening is I think there's a really strong wind of change in this area. So I would love you to talk about how you got there and why you think it's important.
Yeah, you're referring to an article I wrote for Voice and Speech Review, actually, which was a literature review and part argument about how we need singers and singing teachers to step into this space because they're very well equipped to be very effective to address these really important issues. But the way that I came into it was, again, by accident. Or maybe by design, who knows? I'll maybe know that answer in 10 years' time when I look back. But I started a singing group for people with Parkinson's at the university when someone approached the university and said, oh, would you consider helping us start a singing group? And this was back in 2017. And I was like, oh, gee, it sounds a bit daunting. But I happened to have a student at the time who was mature age and very interested in that kind of work. So she really took ownership of the group and I started to do some research around it. And that has just become the most fortuitous thing that's happened, I think, in my career, to be honest, because that opened me up to the whole world of music for health and well-being. Didn't even know that was a thing, and opened me up to the world of participatory or community music, which is many, many moons away from wanting to be the best jazz musician that you can be. It was a whole different way of engaging in music that I was exposed to. And then, it was gradually over time revealed to me that, hey, this is an amazing thing that's happening. It's happening in communities all over the world. And as a musician, I knew nothing about it. That struck me as odd, that those worlds were largely separate. So you have on one hand the kind of the presentational or the performative musician who's there to be the best and hopefully be very well known and well respected and very high skill level artistry, all the rest of it. And then you have the participatory world of music, which is making music is for everybody. And I'm so much more interested these days in the participatory world than the performance world. The performance world is still interesting, but I just think, given what we're facing, as you alluded to, Gillyanne, in terms of this so-called global crisis of connection, I think that musicians actually are playing a really important role in helping to alleviate some of that. And we want more musicians to take up that mantle and work with their communities, because people are crying out for it. And I actually think that musicians need it as well, because I've also done research on music leaders, and that kind of work contributes to their well-being, and it can actually reconnect you to your passion for music, which may have been bashed out of you from trying to be a commercial success. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, and those pressures of the performative side of things, which I felt really strongly when I was training and as a young singer, and which frankly crushed me.
Yeah, there are a lot of people who've been destroyed by that.
Yeah, because of that pressure. And then on the other side, there's the participatory, which I made a note when I was reading the book. Surely when we're looking at this, especially with vocal music making, that was the origins of music. It must have been that people sang together to share stories, to share feelings, that's why we sing, really, and it's why we make music. So somehow we got to this other place, and we could look into all sorts of social reasons why that happened. And I guess none of us would be saying, well, performative now, this is not where we need to be. Yes, we need performative. I would argue, and I'm sure you would, that a performative experience also involves the audience, and it has that sense of community.
For sure.
But it's a different type than participatory community.
I don't think one is worse, better, higher, lower than the other. I think it's really interesting, and what you're describing is something that I've thought of for years, which is the music industry has built a little cogs, and you can be at the top of your cog in whatever you're doing, and then when you move across to another part of the industry, you're at the bottom of that cog. There is no real, it's almost like the cogs are separate and there's no real connection between them as a I'm going to say as a performer, but as a worker.
Yes.
When you cross into another genre, when you cross into another situation or another working thing, then all the experience that you have in your cog, yes, you can carry some of it across, but you don't end up in the same position. And I always think of it as music is like it's not a city, it's like a whole set of little villages. They all connect, but they all have completely different feels.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the glorious things about participatory music is that none of that exists.
Yeah.
Everybody's the same. And there's something super liberating about that.
There is so much that we can talk about, but we need to stop here. So we are going to invite you back to carry on the conversation. It's been brilliant talking to you so far. We'll look forward to the next one.
I would love that. Thank you.
We'll see you soon.
This is A Voice, a podcast with Dr. Gillyanne Kayes and Jeremy Fisher.